Hi guys, so Mary Lou McDonald, the leader of Sinn Fein, was interviewed by Sophie Reid of Sky News about the situation in Northern Ireland regarding the importation of goods from Great Britain. What we've seen in the last number of days is the intimidation of people working at the ports. The European Union has asked the UK to suspend those checks carried out for security reasons. And this is all because of Brexit. But let's hear what Mary Lou McDonald had to say about the situation.
Thank you very much for being with us. There's growing concern about these checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. How bad is the situation?
Well, a very good morning to you, Sophie. And as you say, Brexit had dominated very much the political conversation, not just across Britain and Ireland, but of course across the continent and the globe. And the reality is that the deal, the final withdrawal deal, was only struck very, very much at the 11th hour. There are specific protections for Ireland. They are absolutely necessary to protect our all-Ireland economy, to protect our political infrastructure, our peace process, and so on. And it is fair to say that 6 weeks on, that there are some teething problems and difficulties with the application of that protocol. So really what needs to happen is a sensible, informed conversation between the British government on the one hand, the European Commission and institutions on the other.
No, this is not the responsibility of the EU. The EU did not create this problem. So I think it's important to remember what happened. So when the UK decided to leave, there was the withdrawal agreement period, and there was the negotiations for the withdrawal agreement. The European Union said at the time, if you want, the UK can remain part of the single market and the customs union. Leave as a member, but remain part of the single market and the customs union. Now, in regards to Northern Ireland, that would have maintained the status quo. There would have been no checks crossing from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, and there would be no need for a Northern Ireland protocol or any of this. Brexiteers and the DUP didn't want that. And they put pressure, the ERG, remember the ERG, they put pressure on Theresa May's government not to accept that. Boris Johnson's government didn't accept it either. And there were two other possibilities. The other possibility was to have a border on the island of Ireland or a border in the Irish Sea. Now, the border on the island of Ireland, which the DUP would have wanted, because they were against peace in Northern Ireland. They don't care about peace in Northern Ireland. What they were hoping was that if we put a border in the island of Ireland, this will permanently lock Northern Ireland to Great Britain. There'll be a hard border, and it will, at least in their eyes, kick the can of a united Ireland very, very far down the road. The problem with that was, of course, if you have border checks on the Irish border, this is, of course, against the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement says that we shouldn't have these types of checks taking place. And the United States, who was a guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, said, no, we don't want this. This is, if this is put in place, we can't stop it, but if it's put in place, the UK can kiss goodbye to any trade deal with the United States. Because of the Irish lobby, and also because of the general support for peace in Northern Ireland in the United States, on both Republicans and Democratic sides. So the Brexiteers hoped that that was just an idle threat, and the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg went to Northern Ireland and said, yeah, don't worry, there can be a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. It can be an electronic border. And of course he pushed out this, he continually said there won't be an issue, we won't need to have a border. First he said there won't be a need for a border. And most people said, well, you need to have a border. There'll have to be a border. If you're no longer a member of the European Union and you're outside the Single Market and Customs Union, then you'll need to have a border. And then he said, when he was pushed on it, he said, okay, we'll have a border. It'll be an electronic border. And the next question was, well, then how would that work? And he had no ideas. He even said, well, there are other countries in the world that have borders without any problems. And we said, our response to him was, of course, yes, but those countries didn't have decades of armed struggle taking place in their countries. So it was extremely condescending and ridiculously embarrassing, the type of responses that the Brexiteers like Jacob Rees-Mogg had. So it eventually became more plausible to have a border in the Irish Sea. This wouldn't have undermined the Good Friday Agreement, because the UK would still be part of the the UK. Northern Ireland would still be part of the UK, but trade would still be able to take place between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The institutions that were set up during the Good Friday Agreement would be still able to operate. The Brexiteers told the DUP, don't worry, we'll never sign up to that, until the very last minute, when it became apparent that's the scenario. There'll be a border in the Irish Sea. The DUP lost their minds. They challenged Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson, even to this moment, is saying, no, there is no border in the Irish Sea, when there is a border in the Irish Sea. So just to come back to what they said, this is not the job of the European Union. This is Britain's doing. This is Brexiteers doing.
And the flexibilities and mechanisms envisaged in the protocol need to be used to iron out and mitigate those initial problems. But it also has to be said, Sophie, that Brexit was never a good idea. We argued strongly against it. We advised very strongly that there would be disruption, that there would be difficulties. And really, it should not come as any surprise to any sensible person that we are now facing into some level of disruption and difficulty. The protocol flexibility will deal with a lot of those concerns, but no one should pretend, least of all the Brexiteers who shouted most loudly for Brexit and told us that Brexit is Brexit. They should not be surprised at the fact that Brexit is disruptive. Brexit is bad news for Ireland. And of course, it creates these kind of trading differences.
And it's bad news for Britain as well. Look at what's happening on the border. Fishermen are not able to sell their fish, or if they are, they're facing restrictions. They're facing checks. Sorry, not restrictions. They're facing these checks, this extra paperwork, which is creating problems. This is because of Brexit. Now, Brexiteers will blame the EU. They'll blame paperwork. They'll blame everyone else. But this is because of Brexit. When Brexiteers try to say that, no, this is nothing to do with Brexit, then ask them, what was the situation 6 months ago? What was the situation 2 months ago? You can't say this is the European Union's fault when there was an option to stay within the single market and customs union and the UK said no.
Difficulties. I also noticed...
We do know, of course, your position on Brexit very strong, yeah. But at the same time, now that Brexit has happened, just to kind of look at what can be done to try and mitigate the issue.
I'm sorry, no, there isn't an issue. There isn't a way to mitigate the issue. This is the fault of Brexit. Now, if you want to eliminate the problem, you eliminate Brexit. Now, I understand Brexiteers won't like to hear this, but joining the single market and the customs union, the UK could do that. I'm not saying it could happen with the flick of a switch. It could be one day to the next. But if it did, it would resolve these problems. You wouldn't have this issue in Northern Ireland. You wouldn't have the issue where fishermen are not able to sell their fish. You wouldn't have these problems. But this would not affect Brexit, because Brexit was about leaving the European Union. There was nothing on the ballot paper saying we're no longer going to be part of the single market and the customs union. Even some Brexiteers were saying it would be madness to leave the single market and the customs union. We're no longer going to be a member. So the UK is no longer a member. It could rejoin the single market and the customs union and still have completed Brexit. Now, this would be the sensible approach in my eyes. But I know that some Brexiteers would lose their minds over such an idea. But what is the alternative? Tweaking the protocol is not going to fix the problems. Now, it's important to remember that Sinn Fein, and I mean no ill towards them when they do this, but Sinn Fein is benefiting from this. Brexit chaos drives more people to support a united Ireland. So, in a sense, Brexit is a help to a united Ireland. I don't support that position, because I think if you want to arrive at a united Ireland, it has to be done in the correct. I prefer it in a more peaceful way, but we can't escape the reality that Brexit is extremely is a fantastic catalyst to a united Ireland.
At the border and with the movement of goods, do you think the grace period should be extended, as some has called for, to the grace period for checks on goods?
Well, Mr. Šefčovič from the European Commission will be in London during the week. He will meet with Mr. Gove. And I think, firstly, there needs to be a very detailed examination of exactly where the bottlenecks are. And I think there needs to be an assessment of the flexibilities that we have and how they have been applied.
See, just extending the grace periods is like extending the transition period. Yes, it's not exactly the same, but extending the grace periods just kicks the can down the road. But this is not a solution. This is not a long-term solution. Rejoining the single market and the customs union would fix these problems. And then why? What's the problem with rejoining the single market and customs union? It's a political issue. It's not so much a technical issue. The UK could do it, but they don't want to do it. Kicking the can down the road when it comes to the protocol is a decision. They've decided to do that, but it's not fixing the problem. Imagine you have a house with faulty wiring, and instead of fixing the faulty wiring, you just install a fire extinguisher. Your neighbor tells you, look, it would be a good idea to replace the wiring. And you say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to install a fire extinguisher. And then your house burns down. And instead of actually fixing the faulty wiring, you say, well, I'm going to get another fire extinguisher. Yes, but the problem is Brexit, not the protocol. The protocol is the fire extinguisher. Actually, Brexiteers even go a step further. They blame the company who provided the fire extinguisher. The problem is Brexit. The problem is the wiring. You need to replace the wiring. You need to change the wiring. Remove the wiring. Do something. You need to rejoin the single market and the customs union. This would fix problems on the border for businesses in the UK, in Great Britain, and it would fix the issue in Northern Ireland. Why is Boris Johnson not doing that? And also, isn't it interesting that Boris Johnson, because of this issue in Northern Ireland, because of the situation on the border at Dover or other ports, has not run to Brussels to try and sort this out? Isn't that interesting? Michael Gove either. They haven't jumped on a plane, flown to Brussels to speak with the European Union saying, look, we need to sort this out. Why is that the case? Why are the media not asking them? What conversations have you had? Yes, Michael Gove is going to meet with the Vice President of the European Commission next week. But these problems have existed since the beginning of January. So almost a month and a half after they started, the British government are saying, okay, now we'll see about doing something about it.
Or not. So that's the first job of work. And then beyond that, there needs to be a consideration of what we can do whilst respecting the fact that the protocol is now in play. It is a matter of international law. It is absolutely necessary to protect just the baseline issues for the island of Ireland. But I think all of these things, Sophie, are surmountable once we have calm and once we have a sensible conversation. And I've said, I think to yourself, Sophie, amongst others, many, many times, I mean, the truth is that Britain or England in particular has decided to Brexit, and who are we to stop that, although we regard it as ill-advised, but that's just a view. We respect the democratic wishes of your people, but equally there has to be a respect that a Brexit that was not sanctioned democratically by the people of the north of Ireland cannot wreck the Irish economy and the stability that has been painstakingly constructed by all of us over decades now.
Talking about that stability that's been painstakingly constructed by people. The EU hasn't exactly helped matters either, has it? They threatened to trigger Article 16 to stop vaccine exports to Northern Ireland. That would effectively have created a hard border. I know that they rolled back, but they haven't exactly led to the calm and sensible conversations that you've been talking about.
Okay, I'm actually quite disappointed with Sophie Ridge here, because this is not because of the EU. This has been the case since the beginning of January. The vaccine issue was, a mistake. The EU made a mistake in talking about considering invoking Article 16. That was a mistake, yes. They owned it. They said, whoa, that was a mistake, and they took a step back. We have to remember 2 weeks before that, Boris Johnson was talking about invoking Article 16. And the media didn't ask him one question about that. The DUP have been talking since the beginning of January about invoking Article 16, and the media hasn't covered it. I have covered it. And the DUP also have been talking about scrapping the protocol completely, and the media haven't been holding them to account over it. Boris Johnson last week, during Prime Minister's questions, said he was willing to invoke Article 16 if need be. So why is it when the EU consider invoking Article 16, the media lose their minds? But when Boris Johnson says it on 2 occasions, we don't hear a peep from them. When the DUP say we're going to thrash the protocol, protocol should be thrown out, and we see loyalist paramilitaries who have connections to the DUP threatening members of staff who work in these ports, and instead of talking about that, the media's response is, "Oh, look at what the EU have done. How very bad EU. This is absurd."
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and everybody agrees that the talk some days ago about any prospect of triggering Article 16 was absolutely ill-judged. And fortunately, the European institutions stepped back from that very quickly when they gauged the reaction of everyone, including all of us on the island of Ireland. So that didn't happen, nor should it. And so, therefore, I think any talk from any quarter of some kind of retaliatory tit-for-tat approach.
It's actually not a tit-for-tat and it was not retaliation. Boris Johnson had mentioned it before the EU had mentioned it. The DUP have been banging on about it since the beginning of the year. So if anyone was actually retaliating, it would be the EU. But of course they were not doing that. This was something that was affecting all of the European Union. And then they realized, oh, Northern Ireland could be affected. Let's take a step back.
By the British government, I think is just very, very reckless. I think good sense, common sense, and a real understanding that Brexit is for keeps. I mean, this is a big game changer for all of us, and it has to be managed in a way that is sensible, in a way that is fair. None of us wanted trading barriers between our island and the island of Britain or across the continent, but Brexit has happened, and in some respects, those that advocated this so strongly now need to very much accept the fact that these are the consequences.
Mary Lou McDonald doesn't seem to understand Brexiteers very well. They don't accept consequences. They don't accept responsibility. They created this problem, but they want somebody else to fix it. Boris Johnson lied to the people of Northern Ireland, but instead of turning around and saying, oops, sorry, I lied to all of you, there's going to be a border in the Irish Sea, he's not turning around and saying, I lied. He's continuing to lie. He's continuing to say that there's no border in the Irish Sea. You know, the British government said we're threatening to break international law. And Brexiteers didn't have a problem with that. Brexiteers don't care about international law. They don't care about taking responsibility for anything. They don't care about the people of Northern Ireland. They never have. They never will. The people of Northern Ireland, the DUP, were a tool for Brexiteers. They understood that we can use these people. We can dismiss arguments about Brexit by using Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, now some of them are realising, others are not. And the people of Northern Ireland, who were one of, the situation in Northern Ireland was one of the very first issues, one of the very first alarm bells when it came to Brexit, was ignored, and now it's coming home to roost.
Of their decisions. And for us on the island of Ireland, there is the immediate need to have the protocol work to protect Irish jobs and livelihoods, to secure the infrastructure of our peace process, but also looking ahead, Sophie, we face into a very interesting and a very challenging time ahead for all of our people, because the constitutional question on the island of Ireland is now live. The issue of partition and the border on our island almost a century on. And that's something that the British and Irish political system need to step our way through very carefully, because we need to create the ground and the plan now for an orderly, peaceful, democratic, constitutional change. And
what you're talking about here, of course, is a united Ireland via a border poll. As I said before, Brexit has been a huge boost to Sinn Fein and the Republicans who want a united Ireland. And I think, and I've said this on numerous occasions, Boris Johnson has done more for a united Ireland in the space of a year and a half than Sinn Fein and the IRA and other movements within Northern Ireland could have ever achieved in 100 years. This, in a sense, plays into the hands of Sinn Fein. Chaos regarding Brexit plays into the hands of Sinn Fein. And I'm not saying it because they want that, but they are seeing opportunities here. And they're taking advantage of the situation. Any political party would do the same. But to fix this problem, truly fix this problem, you're not going to be able to tweak the fire extinguisher. You're not going to be able to install a new one. The problem is the wiring. The problem is Brexit. And you need to take a hard look and understand leaving the single market and the customs union was never sold to the public as the driving force behind Brexit. Leaving the European Union was. The UK has left the European Union as a member. Rejoining the single market and the customs union would fix this. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?